Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now, today we're going to be going over some recent developments within the crypto market overall, just because we've been seeing a lot of really bullish things happening, where we've seen rate cuts, we've seen stimulus, we've seen a lot of different things like that going on. And so I wanted to go over that today and just do a quick overview of kind of what things look like currently and what we could be seeing over the next weeks, months, years, going on like that. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive right in. So starting out, what we can see is that crypto bubbles look pretty decent on the day. So, obviously mixed overall. We can see that the day itself is green. We've seen, some moving up pretty well. We've seen some moving down a decent bit. Generally a mixed day overall. It's just the gainers have kind of, I guess I should say the winners have kind of seemed to outpace the losers. And that kind of looks to be holding relatively well over the market. We have seen the market move up very dramatically, particularly Bitcoin specifically, but overall, the market itself has kind of moved up. We can see on the week, tons of green all over the place here. Bitcoin itself almost 10% in the past week. Things are looking good. Ethereum 16%, Polygon 21%. There were a lot of people claiming that Ethereum is dead and might be dead and all this type of stuff. It's not appearing that way, based on what we're seeing here. Solana's moved up almost 20% overall. Things are kind of looking really, really good all throughout the market. On top of this, what we can see is a couple other things going on. So first, we can see the Fed has cut rates again. And so, now this was another quarter point. So we can see, we kind of topped out on the market here. We could see a half a point in September, which we did cover on the channel, but now we can see another quarter point here. And so I think the expectation is that this is going to continue to come down. Inflation has seemed to kind of slow down, and so now we're kind of in that rate cutting cycle where we start to bring rates lower. Generally, when rates kind of start to move down, we can see they are generally followed by recessions most times. Unless we are kind of in a period like this, then we may only see 2 or 3 rate cuts and then kind of hold things level. But generally, when we start to see periods of large rate cuts, is generally followed by a recession. And so depending on how much more and how much more aggressively we see rates continuing to get cut, this could mean potentially some worrying things. And also what we can see is, to kind of follow along with this, is China has just announced a 1.4 trillion plan to rescue its local government. So obviously the Chinese government not really in a great place overall. 1.4 trillion is actually an insane amount. This is, I think, over triple what they spent when Evergrande collapsed. Evergrande was like the most catastrophic thing that the Chinese economy had really ever seen before, and this is 3 times the size of that. So obviously, there's a lot of potentially concerning signs coming out of China here, but overall, that's kind of what we're working with so far. So overall, we can see that that there's a lot of reasons as to why China is cutting, but ultimately it revolves around primarily a property crisis, high youth unemployment, and then also the possibility that maybe Trump kind of reinstates the trade war that was happening kind of in his first term. So that that's kind of what I think China is trying to kind of fortify themselves a little bit and kind of hopefully hold up their economy so it performs relatively well. As we can see, looking at Bitcoin specifically, though, we can see that obviously it's moved up very, very well here on the short side, and then it's actually held pretty well here. We can see on the Bollinger Bands on the 1 hour time frame, things have started to consolidate again, meaning that potentially we see a little bit of a move down, kind of is like a bit of a recovery. Also, it could just mean that we're getting ready for the next leg up, and depending on the point in which we are in the market, generally when you're in a downtrend, you always expect the downtrend to kind of prevail, and so if there's kind of a 50-50 shot, you're probably going to be better off betting on a move to the downside. Same goes for the for an uptrend, but in the opposite direction, right? So usually when you're in an uptrend, it's usually in your best interest not to bet against kind of the motion of the market, which is going to be the upside. So it seems like we could maybe continue up here, but it's really hard to say. If we look at where we're at right now, we have kind of recovered a decent bit. This is what I've been trying to show you guys multiple times on the channels. We can see this is actually probably some of the most this is probably one of the biggest examples of bullish divergence that we've seen yet. We can see if we pull this all the way down to here, we can see that RSI has kind of recovered pretty aggressively, but what we can see from the same point in time is this is where price was, and now this is where price is now. So this, from like a fundamental or like a technical perspective within the market, this is fantastic news, because while we've seen the RSI go from essentially fairly heavily overbought down to almost neutral, we've seen price actually even continue to go up, which is insane. And so this is obviously a really good thing that we're seeing. If we do look at the daily chart though, let's kind of zoom this in a way that looks a little bit better. If we do look at the daily chart, we can see that over time, let's just get rid of these. We can see that we actually are sitting in overbought on the daily. Obviously, we've seen this massive candle and a continued rise to the upside. So from the daily perspective, it does seem to me that, you know, maybe we do see a little bit of a pullback, maybe sort of like similar to what we saw here. But overall, you know, things are, I would say, generally looking quite good. So that's kind of where we're at here. Another thing that I wanted to take a look at is open interest, because open interest has exploded. In volume it has as well, but both for Bitcoin specifically, as well as the whole market. We can see on the whole market, the previous all-time high was just shy of about 81 billion. It's 80.99. And now we can see we're at 84.99 billion. So things are just kind of kicking off here, and it's looking really good. We can see, you know, kind of a continued upswing in open interest ever since we kind of saw that flash crash in August, which kind of liquidated a lot of people here. But what we can see on Bitcoin is something very similar. You know, we just continue to make and break new all-time highs. So right now we're at, you know, 46 billion of open interest. The previous high that we saw here was about 43. So obviously open interest in Bitcoin is continuing to explode as well. There's been a lot of, I would say, bullish political announcements coming out about, you know, the U.S. potentially creating a Bitcoin strategic reserve, things like that. If that does happen, we're probably going to see several other governments announce similar things, and there's probably going to be some pretty large buyers in national governments trying to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. Now, if you ask me, I think this kind of flies directly in the face of what Bitcoin was intended to be, but you know, that's just kind of how the market has developed, and we just have to kind of play with the hand that we're dealt, and overall, you know, it's a pretty decent hand to play if you're a Bitcoin or a crypto holder. So overall, you know, that's looking pretty good. Also, what we can see here is just looking at Bitcoin specifically on the exchange liquidation map, we can see that it's actually kind of moved a bias towards liquidating shorts, which would indicate a move to the upside, which, given the recent increases in price that we've seen, is kind of crazy. But however, we still can see on the 7 and 30 day that there is definitely still a bias toward the downside. Like I said, given kind of the recent developments and things that we've had, I'm not sure exactly, you know, when we'll see a move to the downside or how long it will sustain itself. I think at this point, you know, if we look at the chart, it's probably almost certain that we at least see some sort of pullback, you know, at least to some degree. But when that will be and how long that will be is you know, kind of totally up in the air. And so that's kind of what we're looking at right now. Also, I did want to bring up, as you can see, you know, I've been doing a lot of my charting in recent stuff on BTCC. If you are interested, I do have a link to get signed up for BTCC. They're doing actually a recent campaign where you get a 10% deposit match. So for example, if you were to deposit $10,000, you would get $1,000 deposited, kind of as like a deposit match. They also have up to $10,055 of a deposit bonus, or like a new user like incentives. So if you want to go in and kind of try and meet and hit some of those incentives, you're more than welcome to do that as well. If you are interested, like I said, I have that link in my description, so feel free to go ahead and get that checked out. The last thing I want to take a look at here today is the liquidation heat map, because what we can see on the heat map is obviously we had this massive wall of liquidity here at like previous all-time highs. Now that we've broken that, you know, we can see walls of liquidity like kind of coming in, trying to find spots, but overall, like, you know, we're kind of in a level of price discovery. Nobody really knows how high it can climb. Nobody, I think, is really trying to put a super solid bet as of, you know, it's going to pull back at 80,000 or whatever, like, just because there's not that like previous market action to support some of those moves. And so what we can see so far is that there is definitely a level of, you know, price discovery. People don't know, and so there's not a ton of like resistance points, at least that we're seeing as far as like liquidation points that we're hitting. So anyway, that's kind of how things are looking today. Hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, please do give me a like and subscribe. It really does help me out. Also, if you have any comments, questions, anything like that, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. I do try to read and respond to all of my comments, and so if you're trying to get a hold of me or have any questions, anything like that, that's probably the best way to do so. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.